Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. Well, not exactly. Well, in fact, not at all. Not even today or next week. It's the Middle East and the Arab world 2011. Something's happening there. What it is ain't exactly clear. Even with hindsight, which is supposed to be 2020. To help clarify a very complex and fast-moving situation is a frequent guest here, Richard Murphy, former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Syria, Mauritania, and the Philippines. He has served as Assistant U.S. Secretary of State for Near Eastern and Asian Affairs. He has been named Career Ambassador. He has been a Senior Fellow for the Middle East at the Council on Foreign Relations. Ambassador Murphy is a frequent TV commentator and widely consulted expert, and he's just back from the region. Welcome back, Mr. Ambassador.
Thanks so much.
What's going on?
Enormous confusion, enormous excitement. I was out in Kuwait at a conference bringing together a number of regional observers, a couple of us from the U.S. side, but mostly from the Gulf, from Saudi Arabia, from Tunisia, and it was a fascinating moment because Mubarak had just decided to leave.
So you're right there when it's happening.
And the excitement and the amazement of the Arab observers was electric.
This seemed to have been totally unforeseen just about by everybody, that this college-educated street vendor in Tunisia sets fire to himself in protest, and all of a sudden, in a sense, it looked like a regime in Tunisia falls, Egypt falls, Libya looks like it's going to fall, Yemen. What happened?
What happened was that there was suddenly a spark, a flame, and literally a tragic suicide there in Tunisia that started a conflagration. What happened, the reasons that caused this explosion were known. They were known to you, they were known to me, they were known to everybody in the region. There were so many young people in what they call the youth bulge, 60% underaged, 30.
Mm-hmm. Many educated.
Well educated, many of them. Tunisia, particularly well educated. No jobs, no sense of dignity, of being able to decide, have some role in deciding their own future, a sense of deprivation and frustration.
But the regimes just collapse. I mean, talking about a domino theory, I mean, this is fast that these fell. So the regimes that they established were delegitimized and collapsed.
Well, that, as several of the Arabs said in this gathering, you know, we ended 2010 glum, more of the same, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change. And then all of a sudden, yes, an explosion carries off Ben Ali from Tunisia, first of all, then Mubarak, and then the rumbles become louder in many other countries.
And then Newsweek in a feature piece titles it Rage Against the Regime, and the subhead is, From Tunisia to Egypt to Yemen, a youthful uprising is challenging the Arab world's rulers. But if the old order fails, what will take its place? Let's start answering that second question. What do we see now? I mean, we're going to go through a tour of the region, but generally, what could we expect in 12 months? Since we didn't expect this 6 months ago.
12 months is a long time to project.
Okay.
Again, back to the meeting that I was at in Kuwait, there was this sense that, you know, for once, the Arab is going to be treated like a citizen and not a subject. And he's stood up and he says, you know, I'm going to play a role. I'm going to have a much better future than I've had. If it doesn't work, and the touchstone is probably going to be in Egypt as to whether it works or not,
Okay.
as a model
Sure.
for the rest of the region. If it doesn't work, it could fall back into a version of what brought in Gamal Abdel Nasser in the 50s, a revolt that turned into a military autocracy. If it doesn't work, there could be a period of, well, there will be a period of chaos for a while, no question, because so many accepted facts of life have been overturned, and so many new ways are being talked about. And there isn't yet a coherent set of institutions, of respect for the rule of law, that you can be sure as to being able to say that this new liberation is going to lead to a much better life. But there is that hope.
Okay. What do you mean, or what does it mean to say that it works? What does it mean that this would work?
Well, that the near impossible is achieved, and I say the near impossible when it comes to jobs. It doesn't matter what shape the government is, what form the government takes. It's not going to be able to wave a magic wand and create 1 million+ jobs in any of those countries. It's not going to be able to create political parties that have been either dormant or totally crushed over the years under the leaderships of those countries. They will have to find a way to reason together, to fight together politically rather than just throw off the shackles, so to speak, in the streets of Tunis or Cairo, or Yemen, now Libya. But how it's going to turn out, we don't know. I'm a little cautious, I'll admit. The exciting thing is that what we call American values or universal values, it's the values that we heard the kids and the young people talking about in the streets of the Arab world.
Okay. One of the emerging narratives is that Al-Qaeda has been seriously wounded by the series of revolutions. They didn't have any causative agents in these revolutions. And in a sense, it's a different approach by the Arab street and Arab youth. Is terrorism now, at least for the time being, relegated as an ideology?
I don't think terrorism was ever a popular movement in the Arab world. Qaeda was able to exploit unrest, yes, to exploit dislike of the United States when we moved in militarily to Afghanistan, to Iraq. Watch out, the big bear's coming, he's going to swallow us up. But this this has not become, didn't start and hasn't yet become a religious revolt. We want a better job, we want a better life, we want to share in decision making.
So those folks who looked at the world through the lens of Islamism or Islamic fascism, whatever the term of art was, are looking at a world that doesn't correspond to what we're seeing now in the Middle East.
Doesn't mean it couldn't slide into that, but it hasn't, and that isn't what set the flames that brought down Ben Ali and Mubarak.
Okay, now let's look at the United States. In fact, your successor at the Council on Foreign Relations, Stephen Cook, has argued that this signals the end of the American era in the Middle East. And some commentators who agree with that say, good. Talk to the first question and talk to the second statement.
Well, we reveled in the concept of the world's sole remaining superpower. America could do anything. Our ideas were the best. Our means were the best. Follow us and you'll have a much better life.
But we prop up these autocratic regimes.
Well, just let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The fact is that when it came to Iraq, we hit the wall. And that sense of a limitation on our power, I think, is a good thing, because that's the reality. We cannot transform with a wave of our wand the way of thinking, the future development of the area. We can influence it. We are big, we are powerful, we're not a weak power. But and Stephen, in talking about the end of the American era, if that means the end of this assumption that we could do anything, anytime, anywhere, I say good.
Now, at the same time that Al-Qaeda had no real influence on the events, it seems as if the United States really played a very distant role in this. And in a sense, the administration was caught in a bind between, sort of American ideals and the expediency that had governed our real foreign policy. How did we do? How did he do? And what should we be doing?
I think we certainly had a sense of gratitude to Hosni Mubarak as the 30-year-long president of Egypt for the way he supported the peace treaty of 1979 between Egypt and Israel. That gave a sense of stability in a very tormented region. I think we felt gratitude towards him for his opposition to Al-Qaeda and international terror, and for his interest in containing the contagion or the spread of Iranian influence. That said, we could not support a government when a whole people had turned against it. That would have been foolish. I've heard, and this was the reaction that seemed to be going on here in the States when I was out of the country, that the Obama administration was inept, was timid, wasn't accomplishing anything. I think timidity was a very sensible approach to a highly confused situation. Yes, people saw us in the foreign policy world making sausages, never a pretty sight, as they say. But out of that came a reasonable approach, I think. We didn't want to look like we had thrown away the past benefits that we had from the Egyptian-American relationship. And we initially thought that perhaps he could survive till the election period, next presidential election in September. Mm-hmm. But the people said no, he should go. And we heard that and responded accordingly. It was time to go.
Okay, now the hot spot. I mean, in fact, probably as we're speaking, the facts have outrun our analysis. Libya, as of March 1st, it looked like civil war. It looks like Gaddafi's crazy. It looks like there's going to be intervention. Talk to that. Talk to the sort of the expectations and sort of the oughts of the situation.
Well, I think the positions are very clearly on the U.S. side that intervention should not mean U.S. ground forces. Mm-hmm. That would be the extreme. And that would be the appropriation of a movement whose shape, whose dynamism isn't at all clear to us. We don't know Libya very well. We know that politics is local and that politics has been tribal in Libya.
And not only in Libya, we'll talk about it throughout the region.
Well,
go ahead.
But particularly in Libya. And you're looking at a regime that has, in the name of enabling its people, and there's nobody been more explicit than all my faith, all my trust is in my people, they are going to decide everything through committees at the local, the regional, the national level. I the leader? No, I'm not a leader. I'm not deciding anything. Now, does he believe that? But that has been his line for so many years.
I guess Susan Rice, the United States UN ambassador, said he was delusional. And if you watch him on television, I mean, delusional seems to be a clinically accurate description.
Well, he's been like that for a good many years. But
he was all lunatic rather than...
When you're in the fourth decade of having people around you saying, you know it all, you can do everything, and he would say, oh, well, it's not me, it's the Libyan people. I think he began several years ago to believe it.
Okay. Unlike in Egypt, Libya seems to have no institutions that have legitimacy on a national scale, and even in a regional sense, unlike the military, for example, in Egypt, because Gaddafi has really hollowed out any potential opposition. So assuming that in some way Gaddafi is removed or leaves, what replaced, is there anything to replace it in terms of civic society?
Very little. Very little.
So then it could break down into this tribal phenomenon.
There has been unhappiness in the eastern part of the country from the beginning.
Now,
of
is
the
that the oil region?
It's got some oil, but it's the oil is spread around the desert areas in the south of the country. But it isn't a competition over who's got the oil, who doesn't. I mean, who controls it obviously will control the single greatest economic resource the country has. But there's been political restiveness in Benghazi, in the eastern, the capital of that eastern area, from the beginning of the regime. And he has crushed it and repressed it time after time. But there is still that feeling that we have been imposed on by this leader.
Okay, let's talk oil. One of the obvious reasons for the swiftness of the Security Council resolutions and European reaction is oil, particularly in France, Italy, Germany. Lots of Europe is highly dependent on France on Libyan oil.
On Libyan oil, which is very much prized because it's a light oil. And they have built, in Italy, has built several refineries adapted to that, ready for that light oil. So there is the prospect of a severe disruption in Europe.
And you've got, I think it's the 12th largest producer, but it only produces 2% of the world's oil. But where it goes is, as you suggest, extremely important.
When that 2% is put into question, you see the world price go up and up.
Yeah, well, I have other theories about who's gouging us and why, but I think this is obviously a product of it, because not only is Tunisia potentially unstable, but as we go through this map of the Middle East, you've got other oil-generating areas that could be affected.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at a map. Let's start in North Africa. So you've got Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt on one side of the Red Sea. We've already talked about Egypt, talked about Libya and the spark in Tunisia. What about Algeria and Morocco? It seems as if the kingdoms tend to survive better.
As a broad generalization, I think the monarchies have greater survivability than the what are they called, dynastic republics have had.
Or somebody referred to them as autocratic familiar kleptocracies.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's even juicier.
You like that one. Go ahead.
They have, succession is clearer. I mean, if it's a monarchy, it's somehow been accepted that the family has the right to continue. Or it's an assurance. They can be criticized. They can be pressured. Morocco has its youth bulge and has its job shortages and its complaints about lack of participation in decision making.
So the tinder is there.
The tinder's there, but Morocco's handled it pretty smoothly over the last decade and more. Algeria has been in a state of great restiveness ever since decades now, ever since the death of the first leader of the revolution. When their elections were to be held, I think in 1989, 1990, the army looked at the probable results and saw the conservative religious parties about to take over, and they blocked the elections. And we stayed quiet. France supported blocking the election much more overtly, but didn't Did we make the right choice then? Would it have been better to let the decision of the polls bring that party to power and show, could they govern? Would they be able to manage the treatment of the sewage plant, the water supply, the electricity? Or would they be exposed as just an ideology that wasn't going to produce any services for their own people? Anyway, it's a closed chapter. We stood back, and the rest of us has rolled on from the 90s onward.
Okay, let's go back to Egypt for a moment, because in this region, and certainly in the entire Mideast region, Egypt is a central regional power, or at least it was. And one of the items of discussion is Turkey as a model for Egypt, particularly the strength of the military, the legitimacy of the military, etc. Talk about Turkey in the region and Turkey as a model, as sort of a secular Islamic state, if you will.
Yeah. Well, Turkey's certainly not a state ruled by al-Qaeda or by extremists. And the government has made, the government of Prime Minister Erdogan has made the military nervous that the ideals of statehood of a secular state that Ataturk bequeathed to the Turkish people, that was in danger of being overthrown. I think the facts are that Erdogan hasn't moved in that direction. He has an appeal to the more conservative elements in central Turkey, to the villagers. It's a very devout Muslim country, but there's no serious sign that they're about to abandon a secular government.
Are they then a model in some operational sense for Egypt?
Well,
go ahead.
In
easy.
In one small way, they have had an appeal. They continue to have an appeal as the country that has said publicly to the United States, we don't agree with you. And that's won some applause around the Arab world that's used to hearing, don't irritate Uncle Sam. And the Turks have spoken out critically of Israeli policies in Gaza and the West Bank, and they have been nicer than we certainly have been to the Iranian government. They are neighbors. They have a very important trade relationship, and they see that as a relationship that puts them in a position to influence a government which is very hostile to the United States. So I say Turkey's in a pretty good position as far as American interests are concerned. As far as Egypt is concerned, they don't yield their pride as Egyptians to anybody. They have lost status over the last decade or so as the government turned inward. Yes, there was peace, but the economic level, despite some enrichment of the wealthier Egyptians and the entrepreneurs and the crooks, they haven't lost the memory that Egypt was number one. And there was a sense of hurt that Egypt was sinking. The educational level was dropping. The universities were swamped and the quality of education was down. When I first got to the area in the early 60s, Egyptian teachers were everywhere, tremendous respect, the doctors.
Yep. I went to graduate school with lots of Egyptians.
Yeah, and they came back to the area, and they fostered this impression that Egypt was the leader of the whole region.
Yep.
They lost that status. Now there's that sense, my God, we'll get that back. So I'm just long-winded answer to, they're not going to say that Turkey's the answer, Egypt's the answer.
Okay.
We've got the resources, we've got the history.
Okay, but sort of as outside analysts and kibitzers, you can look at Turkey and say this is a possible future scenario for Egypt.
That is one. There are some dismal future scenarios as well, but the Turkish future is there.
Depress me a little. Give me a couple of dismals.
Well, who's going to be leading Egypt a year from now? Should there be quick elections? A lot of people are saying, watch out, an election isn't the magic solution that Americans have tended to think
Neither is
in the past.
constitution writing, which we're constantly pushing.
Right. Well, they're now amending or drawing up a new constitution. They were scheduled to elect a president in September. The last parliamentary elections added to the combustibility of Egypt by being such a blatant act of fraud.
Right.
Yeah. So, can the new leaders, whose names I mean, we just don't know who's going to end up on top in a year's time, politically. But can they work out a basis for a pluralistic political system where parties really thrive and are respected and have to fight for their political lives in a parliamentary election? Should that be in 6 months? Should that be a little bit longer, a little bit sooner? All of these questions are up in the air.
Let me just close this segment of our conversation, ask about Mohammed al-Baradei as a player in Egypt. And the reason why I'm interested is that he's a personal friend, went to the Center for International Studies at NYU with him. It seemed to be that he was a player. Is he? Talk about that very briefly.
He's a very respected international figure in Egypt. He has given pride to the Egyptian people. Is he a politician? Is he wily enough? He's a courageous man. He went back when things were very unsettled in Cairo. He could have been
a victim.
A victim of it, and the regime left him alone. And certainly didn't encourage his politicking, but he was not personally hurt over the last several months.
Let's close. One word: optimistic, pessimistic about Egypt. But you're an optimist. But go ahead.
I'm excited.
Okay.
I'm excited about the possibilities, but I'm not sure that they're going to work out.
Okay. Join Ambassador Richard Murphy and me next week to continue our geopolitical journey through the Middle East and the Arab world. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.